Hi guys, it's Christopher Coates here, Editor-at-Large of Whisky Magazine, and I'm joined by Jodie Fileatreau, the Artisanal Distillery Manager at the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience, and our very own Maggie Kimberl, Content Editor for American Whisky Magazine, and we're about to do something that I have wanted to do with you for a very, very long time, which is smoke cigars, smoke whiskey and drink cigars.
Yes. We can try that. I mean, it's not advisable.
The reason I've been so excited about doing this for a very long time is that you have a very particular methodology and an approach that I really, really admire to the art of pairing cigars and whiskey, which is something that is notoriously difficult to do. I mean, pairing whiskey with anything I think is difficult, but particularly pairing whiskey and cigars. And you'd said to me before that Heaven Hill is the perfect whiskey company to work with. But why is that?
Well, so Jodie and I have been talking about doing this for a couple of years now. And the reason why is because Heaven Hill actually has a lot of different whiskey products to choose from. So Jodie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the different whiskey mash bills that Heaven Hill makes?
So we have five major mash bills. We have our HH Reg, which is 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. We have our Old Fitz distillate, which is a wheated bourbon, which is a 20% wheat. We have our corn whiskey with 80% corn. Then we have our Barnheim wheat, which is a wheated whiskey. And I think that's one I'm missing.
Rye.
The rye whiskey. Thank you.
I got
we
you.
have our Rittenhouse rye, which is a 51% rye whiskey. So we have a vast taste profile and plenty of products that we could use for these pairings.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And so what we've chosen today is Bernheim Wheat Whiskey, Larceny, and Evan Williams Bottled and Bond. And so we'll get into a little bit of the mash bills after we get started. But first, we're going to go ahead and cut and light our cigars. So I brought a bunch of cutters. So choose a cutter that you like. And here, I'll hand you that one. I'll hand you that one. I use this one. I actually like to do a V cut, and I use a tabletop cutter, which I actually brought with me today. So that's what I'm doing here. And then we're gonna do some lighting. Christopher, go ahead and cut your cigar. That's a single torch right there. And so you're gonna start off by toasting the foot of the cigar.
That was very satisfying.
Right?
That's what I like. That's what I like from a lighter.
It's got a nice weight to it, absolutely. So you toast the foot of the cigar, and you wanna make sure the purpose of toasting the foot is you're trying to bind that wrapper tobacco to the rest of the tobacco so it all burns evenly as you go. So once you get a nice little toast on there, then you can go ahead and... All right. Got a nice light going here. I might need to even that out a little bit. I'm gonna even that out with a soft flame.
And when people are trying to choose a cutter, do you
Yes.
think they need to be very worried? I mean, a lot of cigar places, they'll give you a little plastic one when you start out. But...
We have a lot of options for cutters, right? And the most common one that you're going to see is this double guillotine blade right here. You can get these for $3 to $5 at any cigar shop, but the standard one that you're going to see is Cigar. This is the gold standard of cigar cutters. They last forever. They have a lifetime warranty. They are absolutely phenomenal cutters. And then if you have a humidor at home, you want to get one of these tabletops because these are a lot sturdier and easier to use. And then when it comes time to lighting, you have some options. So we all use torches of different sizes. You can also use a cold flame lighter like a Bic. A lot of brands and a lot of cigar shops will give away these wooden matches. You do not want to use Strike Anywhere matches. You do not want to use a Zippo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You don't want to use a candle or, like a bug light or anything like that. You really want to use the right kind of fire when you're lighting your cigar.
And that's because it'll impact the flavor of the cigar.
Absolutely, absolutely right.
Any inefficient lighter that has unburnt gas coming out of
Absolutely.
it, you just don't want it anywhere near your cigars. I've made that mistake myself in the past, and I can tell you, learn from my errors. Use the right kind of lighter or just a good match.
I think we've all got a good...
Yeah, I think we're all
fire
real good
going.
here. Absolutely. So what we're smoking today is a Partagas Añejo Petite Robusto. It's a 4.5 by 49. Interestingly, and Christopher noticed this as soon as we took them out of the package, it's a barber pole. It has 2 wrapper leaves. So it has a Cameroon wrapper with a Connecticut shade wrapper for the accent design. So the main wrapper is a Cameroon, and then these little barber pole stripes, that is a Connecticut shade wrapper, which I thought was really interesting.
And it's a lovely example of, you know, the kind of effort that cigar smokers are putting into their presentation now.
Absolutely.
You know, we're going through a period at the moment which is really sort of like another golden age of cigar smoking. You know, even in Edinburgh, where a few years ago, well, about a decade ago, when I started smoking cigars, you know, I was an oddity in central Edinburgh, or I felt like one smoking cigars. Now you'll go to whiskey events, light up a cigar, you know, before you finish lighting, you'll look around and somebody else will be smoking a cigar already. You find your people and they find you. Exactly.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be a really good cigar. What do you think so far?
I'm really, really enjoying the flavour so far. And I mean, you know, there were no off notes on the lighting at all. You know, you're straight into the main event.
Yep.
You know, a lot of people, certainly when I was learning about cigars at the beginning of my journey, you know, people said, oh, you know, sometimes the first few puffs can be a little acrid or a little unpleasant. And honestly, I'm finding it happening less and less. Certainly with New World cigars, as cigars that aren't from Cuba are often called.
And you visited the Partagas factory in Cuba recently.
I did, yeah. So this is what's really interesting about this is a non-Cuban Partagas. So those of you who are familiar with things like the Partagas D4 or the P2 or maybe like the Lusitania, the very, very large Partagas, those are Cuban Partagas. But because Cuban cigars can't be imported into the United States, after the revolution, a number of the cigar making families that came to the United States set up their companies again over here using the original names.
Right after the Cuban Revolution, actually Tampa, Florida was the cigar center of the world. And then that kind of moved down to Miami. And then, you know, the Dominican Republic started to produce a lot of really great cigars starting in the 70s. So the Dominican Republic has pretty much been the 800-pound gorilla in the cigar industry for probably about 4 decades now. Now we're starting to see a lot of production taking place in Nicaragua, and it's starting to move into Honduras.
And have you had a chance to visit any of these places yet?
I have been to Nicaragua. I toured all 4 of the Drew Estate factories in Nicaragua several years ago. That was actually the first story that I did for Whisky Magazine when I came on board many moons ago.
Many moons ago, yeah. Well, now we have an amazing cigar lit. Let's start drinking some whiskey.
Sounds great. Well, Jodie, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Bernheim?
All right, so the Bernheim wheat that we're going to taste first, that is our wheated whiskey, 51% wheat at 90 proof, and a 7-year-old product. When you taste this, when you nose it, it's got a great mildly sweet, a little bit of hints of vanilla, and it's got a taste profile that's pretty unique, and it's, you know, goes great with. I think it's going to go really great with the cigar.
Awesome. So the reason that we chose these is because we want to have a wide variety. And the reason I do this is a methodology that I'm teaching. I don't teach people you should like this cigar and this whiskey. What I teach them is to find the pairing that they like the best. And so we're going to start off with these 3 whiskeys that have these very different flavor profiles, and we're going to taste through them, and we're going to figure out which ones we like the best. And we're going to probably be surprised that we don't all like the same thing. So let's give it a try. So take a puff of your cigar. And a little sip of the whiskey. That's actually lovely together.
It really is.
Wow, it brings out a little bit of the leather. I'm getting some stone fruit.
Do you get little hints of toffee?
Little hints of, yeah. Getting some sweetness, maybe toffee. Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I always like to tell people too, I said, you know, don't get hung up on ages or you know, brands. Drink what you like.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, it's just like your cigars. If you want something that it might be a Cohiba or something, but drink, you know, smoke what you like, drink what you like.
Absolutely. Life's too short to do stuff
That's
for others.
exactly
and I think that's something that's so true. You know, it's very, very true of cigars, and it's very similar with whiskey. That just because you know, it's a 4-figure bottle of whiskey or a very expensive vintage cigar from the 70s or something, actually doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a great smoke. Sometimes, I mean, some of the most reasonably priced cigars I've had have been genuinely fantastic.
And I once smoked a $1,500 cigar, and it paired best with a $20 bourbon.
Really?
Love it.
Yeah. So you never know what you're going to get.
So we're going to go the other way.
We're going to go the other way now. So let's have a sip of the whiskey and then try a puff of the cigar and see how it changes. You know what? I get a lot more cedar this way. What do you think?
That definitely brought out more woody characteristics.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the stone fruit flavors you're talking about from the whiskey aren't persisting as much going this way.
And that's
going
always
the other
the interesting thing, because sometimes one of them will mute something in the other one. So it'll be really good going one way, but not so great going the other way.
It's amazing when you speak to people who maybe haven't been in both communities, and when they come together for the first time, they go, wow, they're all thinkers. You know, people talk about thinking whiskies and drinking whiskies.
Yes.
Well, I think that both people who smoke cigars and drink whiskey together, I think they tend to be people who like thinking whiskies. Because
I have
there
a
is
philosophy degree. What are you trying to say?
Oh, well, there you go. Exactly. You know, I think there is a certain, you know, to use the modern popular term, you know, there's a mindfulness that comes with smoking a really great cigar and pairing it with a nice whiskey. It's relaxing. I find myself like I won't even look at my phone for hours when I'm doing this. Which
Well, you have to take
in
your
this day and age,
You have to take your time. You know, you savor the whiskey, savor the cigar.
Absolutely.
And just take your time and enjoy both.
It's meant to be almost like meditation, right? It's meant to be a break from the world. All right, Jodie, why don't you tell us about this larceny?
Right. So the larceny is our wheated bourbon. That's a 20% wheated bourbon, 68% corn, 12% malted barley. Now, when you taste this is a great bourbon that I love for people to try that are really starting out on bourbons, because it's a little bit lighter, a little bit sweeter. It's at 94 proof, so we went up a little bit in the proof, but it's got a great taste profile. So if you want to, take that and kind of nose it.
I just love this one.
It's got a great, great nose, a little bready, because the wheat's coming out a little bit more in it. Something that we didn't do. Cheers, guys! We didn't do that.
Cheers! We're celebrating because you guys have wanted to do this together for a long time,
Right.
We have. We've been talking about this for about 2 years.
Right.
And every time I see Jodie, I'm like, hey, when are we doing that whiskey and cigar pairing? He's like, you know, we really need to do that soon. So here we are.
And sometimes you need this random guy from the UK to just parachute into your into your midst.
You need the catalyst. You're the catalyst to get this done.
I'm happy to be the catalyst when this is the result.
All right. Well, let's try this.
And a little puff of the cigar now. It's bringing out a little bit of the minerality, which is a soil note, and the
maybe it's like even a slight grassiness in the smoke that I wasn't picking up before.
yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I couldn't figure out what that was.
Yep. So that's the volcanic soil.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
And minerality in cigars is something that I don't hear being talked about anywhere as much as I would think that you would, but it is an important part of
A lot of people
the
think that minerality is a bad thing, and all it means is, you know, you're tasting the volcanic soil that the tobacco was grown in. So it's terroir. Cigars have terroir as much as wine or anything else. All right, a little puff of the cigar, and then we're going to go the other way. That's interesting. That brings out a lot of spiciness.
It does, especially on the finish.
Yeah.
On the back part. But
it's like sweet cinnamon.
I was gonna say, you almost get some like a little bit of a caramel on the very front.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a little bit more spicy.
Like apple pie.
It's
kind of like apple pie.
Yeah, I think I prefer this one going this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Before we jump back in, we just have a quick message to show you from our partners, rare whiskey specialist House of Hazelwood. They've teamed up with whiskey expert Dave Broom to create a very special limited release blend and a documentary about the legendary brothers who inspired it. If you want to learn more, follow the link in the description and to read the full article and watch the documentary. Enjoy!
All right. So, Jodie, why don't you tell us about the Evan Williams Bottled and Bond?
All right, so Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, 4-year-old, 100 proof. Mash bill on that is 78% corn, 10% rye, 12% malted barley. We call that our HH Reg. So being a bottled and bond, it's 4 years old, 100 proof, has all go through all the laws of bottled and bond. But one thing about that bourbon there, it really stands up to a mixed drink, or you can drink it straight on the rocks.
Yep.
So it's a great, great all around bourbon.
All right. And this is a very affordable bourbon as well.
This bourbon, you get all the basic vanillas, the caramels. It really stands up.
And could you tell, for anybody that's watching who's not familiar with bottled in bond, could you explain that to people
Sure.
watching?
So, bottled and bond has to follow certain rules. Has to be at least 4 years old. Has to be at least 100 proof. Has to have the name of the distillery and the distiller on the bottle. And basically, it has to be in a bonded warehouse. So back in 1897, correct? Thank you. There was things around people that were called rectifiers, and they would take bad batches of whiskey or different batches of whiskey, and they would add things to them, and change the taste profile, and try to make them better to sell. So some rectifiers were good, some rectifiers were bad, and if everybody has heard the term rot gut whiskey, well, that came because these rectifiers were putting bad stuff in the whiskey and was hurting people. So distillers got together, E.H. Taylor and several other distillers got together, petitioned the government, and came up with the Bottle and Bond Act. And that has to be a bottle and bond whiskey. It has to fit all those laws to be a bottle and bond. And when people comply with all those laws, then you can put a strip stamp on it, a bonded strip stamp, and then it can be a bottle and bond product. So basically, it was Consumer Protection Act. So I think this happened 9 years before the we had
Pure Food and Drug. So this was actually
yes.
one of the first consumer protection
Protection
laws in the United States.
Right. So
And I think functionally today it serves the purpose of, for people who aren't familiar with the category, if you know that you like whiskies that have got a little bit more oomph behind them, generally a bottle in bond is going to be a good go-to.
And it's also a signal that the brand that you're buying actually produced the whiskey. So it's not something, and like Jodie said, there are good rectifiers and there have been bad rectifiers in the past. But this is a signal to consumers that, hey, this distillery actually produced this product.
and we're really big in the bottle and bond market.
And you have been. I mean,
We've
you all
been for a
carried the
long
bottled
time.
and bond category for decades.
Yeah, very good stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's try a sip of this whiskey.
All right.
That is phenomenal. And a little puff of the cigar. That's really interesting because I'm getting some espresso and cocoa now that I wasn't getting before.
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely brought sort of confection notes out of the cigar that
So you think the rye in that brings that out?
That's a good question. I don't know what component actually does that. I don't know if it has more to do with the age, the proof. I mean, definitely something about this flavor profile is working really well with the cigar. All right, little puff of the cigar and then a sip of the whiskey. See if we like it the other way. Chocolate covered cherries. And it's got that spicy finish.
Great spicy finish.
Yeah.
but not an aggressive spice at all.
No.
Right,
This
right.
is definitely putting us in
Just
sort of
that
dessert.
nice warm Kentucky hug.
Yeah, which is what we want.
Absolutely.
So I'm actually getting to the point of the cigar where I'm going to take the band off because I'm in danger of igniting it, which is what we don't want.
This is a very aggressive band. It's a large band for a small cigar.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on there. But I'm going to take it off. There is an interesting culture around the cigar band and when you should take it off or when you shouldn't take it off. I mean, there are no hard and fast rules. It really is down to personal preference. There are some people, it tends to be more traditional cigar smokers who actually remove the band before they begin smoking the cigar at all. Personally, I don't. I tend to leave mine on, and then when you get to this point, I'll take it off. The only time that you ever have to really worry about it is if you're not in the ideal smoking environment. I mean, here at the Louisville Thoroughbred Society, we're in literally the perfect environment. I can't think of a more comfortable environment to be in. But sometimes if the humidity's high or if it's a little cold out, sometimes you'll find that the cigar will expand while you're smoking it, and then it can be a little bit challenging, or even the band can sort of really grip into the cigar. It's never going to do too much damage or anything. It can just be a bit fiddly, which when it's you're holding a bunch of burning leaves, you don't necessarily want to have.
And it can also be a problem if you smoke too fast. If you ever end up with a cigar that's hot and mushy, more pliable, that's because you're smoking a little bit too fast, and you're pulling those natural resins out of the tobacco, and they're kind of making it a little bit hot, and that's when it starts to taste bitter. That's when that happens. So you have to smoke slowly, and that's one of the things that can make the band really stick to the cigar as well.
Exactly. And then that's another rule. Generally, the rule of thumb is the narrower the ring gauge of the cigar, the slower you want to smoke. I think people can very easily go too quickly with narrow cigars, and then that's when you can very easily drift into getting those bitter, unpleasant flavors, which
Absolutely.
you don't want, particularly if you're smoking a $20 or $50 cigar, or, well, to be honest, any cigar. This is
Exactly.
your moment of meditation and contemplation.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't want to ruin it. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it.
Exactly.
So Jodie, what was your favorite pairing?
I think I like the Ball and Bond, the Evan Williams Bourbon Experience.
I think I did as well.
I think I did as well. I mean, I'm
Now-
perhaps biased. Like, I could drink Evan Williams Bourbon Bond all
Absolutely.
day, every day,
Absolutely.
and be very,
Are
very
you going to take
happy.
some of that home with you in your luggage?
I have to.
Okay. Okay.
I did leave room in my luggage.
Now, what you want to do at this point is you want to go back and you want to try all these again, because every third of a cigar is going to taste a little bit different. And so you want to go back and run through that again. But I think right now it's really, really interesting that we all picked the same thing.
I know.
Yeah.
We're all on the same page.
Clearly.
All right.
That's what I like to hear.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right.
And I think it's worth saying as well that you're talking about the flavors
That's the burn
changing throughout the cigar. Sometimes, I mean, depending on the rollers you talk to, some of them say it's to do with when they're bunching the cigars that they'll sometimes throw a little piece of ligero into what equates to the center of the cigar. So you sometimes find that they'll get stronger around the middle and then taper off again. And then some cigars, actually, they just get stronger and stronger as you go down.
Absolutely.
So if you're not comfortable, if you start smoking in a cigar and you go, oh, this is a bit too strong for you already, we tend to say, well, make sure you take it slow, make sure you've had a good meal beforehand.
Absolutely. And don't smoke more than you want. A lot of people say you have to smoke it all the way down to the nub. I smoke them about halfway and then I'm done. That's plenty for me. So everybody has their own personal preference.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, let's see who's Ash.
Yeah, exactly. So this is another. Oh, we're neck and neck.
So, my ash.
So this is another quite funny bit of cigar culture, which is
Long ash
long ash competitions. It is just a bit of fun, though. Although some people take it very seriously. There is
I take it very
There is a
seriously.
competition, I believe,
There
isn't
is.
there?
At most of the cigar events, like Cigar Safari, we were mentioning earlier at Drew Estate. That's one of the main things that they do is the long ash competition. So the function of the ash is actually to insulate the cherry, and it helps it to burn at a more even pace.
I've learned a lot today. I've learned a lot.
We're all learning a lot.
Yeah.
That's why this is so much fun.
And I think that's something that I really love about bringing cigar people and whiskey people together, bringing the products together, is that every day working for Whisky Magazine, I learn something. Usually more than
Absolutely.
one thing.
Absolutely.
And exactly the same thing is true of cigars. I mean, I think you could study it for a lifetime and
Absolutely.
only know a tenth of what there is to know.
And there's a lot of crossover between whiskey
really
and
is.
cigars.
So that's the same as distilling. I mean, you're going to learn something new every day. And that's what makes it fun. And just like, just learning more about cigars. I'm kind of I dabble in cigars, but I'm actually learning something great today. So I appreciate that.
Awesome. I'm glad we finally did this. We've
I
been
know, I
talking
know.
about it for so long.
I know.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover between whiskey and cigars. One of the things that I learned when I traveled to Drew Estate, I did a story about the Pappy Van Winkle barrel fermented cigars. And so, one of the main things that I learned is that there's fermentation in cigars just like there is in whiskey. So all of the tobacco has to be fermented, because if you think about the green tobacco leaf growing out of the ground, you can't burn that, and they are not just drying it out. They dry it out and then they ferment it, and that is what goes into, and there are lots of different methodologies for fermentation. So there's the Perique process, which is used in the wrapper for the Pappy Van Winkle barrel fermented cigar, where they actually take that wrapper leaf and they put it into a whiskey barrel, and they put these screw presses on it, and that pressure creates fermentation within that barrel. The predominant way that this tobacco is aged is pilones, which you probably saw on your trip to Cuba. And what they do is they stack these in these really beautiful piles, and it begins to ferment from the pressure and the humidity and all that sort of thing. And then they take it apart and they restack it the other way. And then they take it apart and they restack it the other way.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It really is.
I mean, when the Cubans say totalmente a mano, completely by hand, they mean it.
They
They mean
absolutely.
it. When you go to the factories, you'll see them literally like pasting the labels on the boxes.
Yep.
I mean, that is how handcrafted it is, from the planting of the seeds right through to the color grading and putting the finished cigars in the boxes ready for shipping.
Absolutely. And Jodie probably does the same thing at work, where he's grading the grains and checking the grain shipments and all that kind of stuff.
It's a great it mirrors each other so close. It's really neat.
I think something else that's perhaps worth... Oh, I've lost my ash. There you
I
go.
win.
You win. There we go. Exactly. There you go. The pro.
Well, what the trick to this is you have to hold it straight up and down, so you have to also
You end up
smoke
doing
it straight up and
Up
down.
and down.
The thing I was going to say there was that I think I've spoken to a lot of people who are new to cigars, and sometimes they're new to both whiskey and cigars. The inclination for the uninitiated seems to be, a cigar that's going to have all this flavor, so I need this really hefty whiskey to go with it. I need a high ABV. I need like as much flavor as possible. And it's like, actually, calm down. I mean, if that's what you like, then sure.
Sure.
No judgment. But generally, I don't suggest people go for like super high ABV things, because I think it can, for me anyway, interfere in the cigar smoking experience.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what Jodie and I were talking about before you got here. Is the reason that I started doing this is because I've traveled all over, and I always try to pop into the cigar shops. I like to learn, what the regulations are, because everybody has different laws everywhere. But I would go in and I would say, well, what kind of whiskey do you recommend with this cigar? And they would say, oh, well, if you have a full-bodied cigar, you get a full-bodied whiskey. If you have a light-bodied cigar, you have a light-bodied whiskey. And I heard that over and over and over again, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And so I was complaining to my colleague, Michael Veach, and I said, why does everybody keep saying this? It doesn't make any sense. You should be going for balance. And he said, well, why don't you just start writing about it? And I was like, oh, nobody wants to hear that from me. Famous last words, right? Because we
do.
because now I've been writing about it for about 10 years and teaching classes for about 8 years. And it's really eye-opening when you go through this, because I always recommend that you start off with at least 3 whiskeys with different flavor profiles. And it doesn't matter. It can be 3 different bourbons. It can be 3 different whiskeys. It can be, Scotch, an American whiskey, and a Canadian whiskey. It can be any kind of lineup that you want. But you really don't want to go too much over 100 proof. The highest proof whiskey that I've ever successfully paired, I think, was probably around 115, 117. After you get past, the 100 to 110 mark, it really just becomes, the whiskey kind of overpowers anything that you put with it. And it's not impossible, but it becomes a lot harder.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you so much. I've wanted to do this for such a long time. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you and to learn about these whiskies and how to pair them properly with a cigar. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for being with us today, Jodie. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we finally got to do this.
Thank you for having me. It's been great. And like I say, we need to do it again.
Absolutely. I agree.
And if you guys watching this have any comments or any thoughts on how you go about approaching pairing whiskey and cigars, maybe if you've got some thoughts on these specific pairings, please jump into the comments. Tell us what you think. We really want to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Because obviously, like everything in whiskey, it's all about down to personal preference. So if you think you've got your own tips and tricks, get in the comments, tell us what you think, and maybe we'll talk about them next time we hopefully get together to do this.
Perfect. Cheers.
Cheers, guys, and cheers to you both. don't forget to like and subscribe. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. This is just a quick message to tell you a little bit about American Whisky Magazine. Published in print 6 times per year and offering regular news coverage online at AmericanWhiskeyMag.com, American Whisky features whiskies from all over the United States and includes distillery focuses, interviews, and topical features penned by the world's leading drinks writers. Each issue explores American whisky's people, places, history, and production, and it also carries blind tastings of newly released whiskies of all styles from all over the United States. This is to help you pick your next bottle to drink, collect, or gift. Follow the link to claim your free digital edition and check out the latest subscription offers. Enjoy!